Welcome to In Studio from Simply Timeless. My name is Jay Daniels. Thanks for joining me. 20 years ago, I first heard the vocal stylings of Diane Schuur. Little did I know that here in 2020, Deedles and I would be sharing a conversation together about our mutual love of this music. She's just released a new album called Running on Faith from Jazz Heads. It's produced by Ernie Watts. Diane shares some of her stories from her illustrious career, as well as the inspiration behind this album. And you'll also get to hear my own story that I share with Diane of how her music impacted my life and musical career. Here's Diane Schuur sharing about how this season may very well bring about some good things.
This could be an opportunity for like a raising of consciousness.
I hope so.
No matter what religion, I don't judge a person for whatever faith that they believe in, whatever, like higher power or whatever. I just, that's my hope and that's my wish is, all of that kind of stuff. But are you originally from the East Coast, or?
I have never left the East Coast. I grew up in Virginia. I lived there for nearly 30 years until I moved here to Pennsylvania. So if you hear a bit of a Southern accent, that's where that comes from.
Oh, you must be in your 60s then.
Oh, no. I'm 31, Deedles. Just 31.
Oh, will you please forgive me?
You're not the first one to tell, especially just being over the phone. People talk to me. They're like, so you've been around a while. And I'm like, 31 years, maybe. Yeah.
31, and you have such a love for, for vinyl and stuff like that. I mean, my first vinyl was released like in 1980. Well, that's the big kind. I recorded a country record when I was 17 on a 45 RPM, actually, from the late Jimmy Wakely. He was the producer. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not.
What was the song? Which songs were on that record? I don't know Jimmy, but I might know the songs.
Well, I don't know. It was a tune that Jimmy Wakely's daughter wrote called Dear Mommy and Daddy, and it's on... It's the very first record that I ever recorded when I was 17 years old. And, I'm 66 now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, but I would tell you, when I listen to you, and this means no disrespect by any means, but there are a lot of artists that they do not maintain their vocal folds. They do not take care of themselves. And when they get to a certain point, it really starts to show. And I listened to your album and I said, the range is still there. And I said, if anything, the lower portion of your range has opened up a little bit more than I remember from some of your recordings.
Yeah, Jay, because of the fact that I'm not a shouter. I'm not like, I'm not an atomic bomb, like, shouting to that's the only thing that I could think of right away. I'm more like a nuclear reactor now. And so I try to really utilize my lower register because my mid register, it's not gone. It's just, but I can still get really high though too. But I'm very select about it.
Yeah.
I don't do as much gymnastics as I used to. Stan Getz always used to tell me that less is more, and all of that. And I kind of like took that to heart. Yeah, it's been a very interesting career, and it's so cool that you were able to watch the Tonight Show. I probably did. I Can't Believe That You're in Love with Me. That's probably one of the tunes that you heard.
I think Deedles Blues was one of them that you did on the Count Basie album. You had Doc and the orchestra play that one with you.
Well, if it was on the Tonight Show, of course, it was conducted by Doc Severinsen. And Ernie Watts was probably playing sax. And, of course, as you know, he's on this latest album. He co-produced it with me.
That's right.
So, yeah, so it's, Ern and I have known each other since '86, since I appeared on The Tonight Show for the first time in that year. And that was the year that Timeless won for best. You know about the Grammy thing.
I know a little bit about it, but not a lot.
Well, I won 2 years in a row. I won for an album called Timeless, which was released in '86, and then Diane Schuur and the Count Basie Orchestra was released a year later. And I won Grammys for Best Female Vocalist for both of those albums. And but I was nominated a total of 5 times. Another time I did a album called Love Songs, and that was the same year that Natalie Cole, her husband Andre Fisher, produced the album Unforgettable.
Yes.
But I was one of the people that was one of the nominees, or you know what I'm trying to say.
I think so,
I
yes.
didn't win the nomination, but I was, you get it anyway. Anyway, it's just been a very interesting, career, and it's so interesting too because of the fact that your radio show is going to Australia as well, and I haven't been to that country. I've been to New Zealand a couple of times, but not to Australia yet.
I haven't either. I have never left the East Coast, and I haven't left the country. I have plenty of exploring left to do.
Yeah, I've been. Let's see, I've been to 5 out of 7 continents. Australia and Antarctica are the only ones I haven't been to. So.
Are you planning an Antarctica tour anytime soon?
In Antarctica, no.
Yes.
Gosh, come to think of it, I wonder if they got the coronavirus in Antarctica.
I did wonder about that. It's like, you better watch those science stations down there, you know. I know you've got to miss the road. I mean, it's been such a habit for you for, over 50 years you've been performing.
Oh, I know. My first professional date, I just turned 10. January 4th was the date. It was a Saturday afternoon. I did my first professional job at the Holiday Inn in Tacoma, Washington State. And in fact, on one of the album's called Some Other Time, the track we were able to preserve that's on there is September in the Rain, and that was one of the first things that I recorded back when I was 10, and it's on that album. And it's kind of like an emulation of the Dinah Washington tune.
Yeah.
And so that she did, okay? Because I did 2 versions of September in the Rain. I did that version, and then which was captured. It was on reel-to-reel, and then it was transferred to cassette, and then to Pro Tools. So it went through its share, and then I did another version of September in the Rain on the album Love Songs, which was put out in '93. Completely different. Just as different as night and day. You wouldn't think it was the same tune. It's so different.
And you mentioned Dinah Washington, and I know that she has been a major influence upon your career. When did you first hear her?
When I was a little kid, my grandmother used to bring me albums as gifts. Like first album that I heard was was simply called "What a Difference a Day Makes," and then I heard she had an album called Unforgettable, and the first track was "This Bitter Earth," and that's where I learned that particular tune. And so the arrangement is taken from that track.
And you and I have one thing in common, and I didn't realize I had this for a long time. My granddad would, he played everything by ear. In fact, my first musical moments were when my granddad would play on the Wurlitzer console organ at church every Sunday. The trouble was, he would play every song in A flat, so songs that were supposed to be in F or D flat. Can you imagine how we sounded trying to sing those? But I remember as a kid, though, I would hum back these tunes as I heard them in the key I heard them, and I never thought anything of it, until years later, and someone said, "Jay, do you realize that you're replicating the exact pitch that you're hearing?" And then I said, "No, doesn't everybody do that?" And then someone said, "Well, Jay, you have perfect pitch." And I was doing some reading on you several years ago, and apparently you received that gift as well.
I did. And it's so funny because you're talking about your father singing in doing everything in A flat. Yeah. My grandmother did the same thing. She did. Oh, there's a song. Oh, I just remembered there's a song that she used to do in the key of A flat, by the way. Yeah, I'm walking. You inspired me to get up. I'm walking toward the piano. I have two of them. I have an upright Baldwin, and I have a baby grand Baldwin. And I remember her playing this. This is what I remember. My grandmother used to call her Mama Joe, but I remember her playing like this. I don't even know what the song was called or anything like that, but I just remember her playing that.
Yeah.
And that's my dad's mom, and she used to teach piano, to her students and stuff. So, but my father, he used to play in the key of E flat as well as but he did boogie woogie in C. So I thought that was really interesting, and he played by ear as well.
Yeah. The word was, and I never met him, on my dad's side of the family, he had musical influence from both. So it was, granddad played at church. On my grandmother's side, this is both from dad's family, my grandmother didn't have any musical talent. She said she couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, and I think she was right. But her dad, which I never met, he was long gone before I came around. The word was that Mr. Kingston could play any instrument that he was given, a piano, organ, banjo, guitar. And I just find it interesting. The sad thing is, in my dad's family, none of them ever took their music seriously. It was not encouraged. If you were a man, you had to work with your hands. That's what you were supposed to do. So it was a missed opportunity, but I got it. And I absolutely fell in love with music in general, not just one particular genre, but I take it that you were close with your parents. I was reading some stories about that the other day.
Yeah, well, I was close to a certain extent, except that I went to the state school for the blind when I was 4.5, so I was away from home a great deal. And then my mom died of cancer when she was 31 and I was 13. So it was a bit limited as far as, all that. But they, Mom was quite wonderful, in her way, and Dad was too. Did you hear Puss? That was Puss.
I did. Is Puss hungry?
Puss. Nope. Puss. And one more meow. You're on the radio. Puss. She's never been captured on radio, so this is kind of cool.
See, I didn't know that we were going to have a special guest of the feline kind this afternoon.
I didn't know it either. just never know about this Puss. Her name was originally Phyllis, but I had a lady that looked after the cat for about a year, and her name was Phyllis, and it got a little bit confusing, so I thought I'd better name her Puss.
Can you imagine the questions that woman thought that you were asking to her that you were asking to the cat?
Oh, I couldn't even imagine. But she just Puss did it right on cue. Now I got to get back to work, Puss. So anyway, yeah. So, but it just happened, getting back to my grandmother. That's what Puss. What? My goodness.
Somebody's talkative today.
I know, and now she's purring up a storm. She's what? Do you like the sound of Jay's voice? What? He's not talking.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's kind of cool. But anyway, getting back to Mama Joe. Now, will you let me talk? Thank you.
I thought you were asking me that. I'd be like, well, yes, you can talk. Go right ahead.
I was but anyway, I still don't know what tune that was or anything, but on my dad, my grandmother was wonderful, and so was my mom's mom, and who brought me the different albums. And I mean, I remember listening to Earl Bostic, the late Earl Bostic, Flamingo, a tune called Always, and Deep Purple, and all of that stuff, those great tunes. And I tell you what, I miss Tower Records, going in there, and when there was vinyl, you could there's nothing like the smell of those record covers, you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
Nothing like it in the world. And it's, and I have a turntable, believe it or not, and it's been a long time that I can make vinyl into MP3s and stuff, which is, I haven't done that for a long, long time. I may have to go through my record collection one of these days, but...
How many vinyls do you have?
Oh, God, a lot. They've moved around with me. We moved around when I was a kid a lot. Dad would fix up these houses and then sell them, and then we'd move somewhere else. I'm sure I've got hundreds. I don't know how many of them are in very good condition. But if you're a fan of George Shearing's, I have album that is very rare that probably, I don't know if you could find these days. It's on vinyl. It's called Concerto for My Love. It's absolutely gorgeous. Have you heard of it?
I have not. I have a lot of George Shearing in my collection from Capitol and from MGM, but I do not have that album.
Yeah, do you have the album Here and Now? It's got People, it's got Call Me Irresponsible, it's got Bluesette.
No, most of the ones I have from him are going to be, I have several of his later works on CD from Telarc, but the ones that I have, I think the newest one might be 1960 or 61. It's all from that 1950s Shearing sound era. Oh
yeah, well, these two albums that I'm referring to are with strings, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And my mom introduced me to that album, Concerto for My Love, that has Portrait of Jenny and Love Letters and P.S. I Love You. Not the Beatles' P.S.
Yes.
I Love You. There's you know what I'm talking about.
I do, as a matter of fact. That I have, I've got sheet music for that particular song somewhere in my library.
On Amazon, you can actually stream the album Here and Now, which I've been known to do because I have the devices. As a matter of fact, the day that it was a Tuesday afternoon, I think it was like maybe 2 weeks ago. Now I have, Amazon has Alexa. I can't say it too loud, otherwise she'll boink at me.
Yes, that's right.
But she, I said, Alexa, play the album Running on Faith by Diane Schuur. And she says, here's Running on Faith, the album by Diane Schuur. And I thought, and it was a fluke because I was just testing to see if it was ready to stream, and sure enough it was. I was just so happy. It really made my day.
I'm not the first one to uncover a lot of these facts, but I haven't heard it directly from you. As we were talking about earlier, I found some clips from The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, which Doc Severinsen especially, I don't know if you would say it was serendipitous. Maybe you would. But I was reading, and he played quite an important role as far as your discovery as an artist there in the Northwest of the United States.
My twin brother took me to the Opera House to watch Doc Severinsen and his big band perform But before we got on stage, I auditioned for Doc Severinsen, and I auditioned for Ed Shaughnessy. You remember who he was, right?
He was the drummer. That's right.
Yeah, Eddie Shaughnessy, and of course I remember doing Unchained Melody on piano. My brother was at the drums. He was a drummer, and we did a few gigs in the Northwest, up and down the coast, and we actually went to L.A. and I performed my brother and I performed at this club called the Etc. And then Doc invited us to his office the next day, and his manager, Bud Robinson, and I'll never forget this. It's as clear as yesterday, okay?
Yeah.
And I was just anticipating, going to become a big star and do all this stuff, and Doc says, Diane, you're not ready for stardom. And I swear, it was like the world just kind of, it just felt like the bottom just dropped out. I was so disappointed, at least at first. But then I was invited to perform in Monterey with Ed Shaughnessy's big band called Energy Force at the Monterey Jazz Festival. So that's what I did in 75, September 20th. It was a Saturday night, and I remember that so clearly. That was really interesting. And I did a few gigs with Eddie after that, and so on. So, God, there's just so many memories.
But you also you could write a book, couldn't you?
Well, who knows? I mean, I talked with my very dear friend who's booking agency. It's called ARC, and Adam is the guy that heads it. And because of this thing that's happening, this pandemic that is happening, it could be quite a while before people are really ready to go out and see performers. I don't know if it's going to be a year or whatever, but who knows? If it is, maybe I'll start writing a book. I don't know.
Two other topics I'd like to hit, and then I have a story of my own to share with you. I would like to ask you, obviously, you talk a little bit about the album, but I'd also like to hear about Stan Getz in addition to that.
I'll give you the clean version.
This is a family program, so that's much appreciated.
Yes, I'll give you the clean version.
I mean, these are jazzers, so I mean, God knows we have to clean it up.
Oh well, yeah, and Stan Getz was. He heard me at the 1979 Jazz Festival in Monterey, and wanted to take me under his wing and took me to the White House. I performed with him in '82. You can find that on my website, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
We did. At the end, we jammed on Summertime. And I looked on YouTube, and it's there, but it didn't show when Nancy Reagan came up and gave me a big hug at the end.
There is a 2020 interview that was, I forget who did the interview with you. They came to your home, and they were talking about this, and they actually showed the clip where Nancy Reagan just basically comes rushing up. And I think, as I remember, you basically said, that's all well and good, but who are you?
Yeah, I said, who is this? And she whispered back to me, Nancy Reagan. And I said, oh, that Nancy. And she got a big kick out of it. And, that was something I'll definitely never forget.
And they had you come back and play again at the White House.
Yes, in '84. It was for the Senator's Wives Luncheon. Is what that was for. 84 was it was very interesting. I appeared on the Merv Griffin show, once by myself and then once with Jose Feliciano. Jose and I performed on American Bandstand as well as Solid Gold.
I know that you have accomplished much in your career, and I have several of your albums in the library, and
Oh, great.
you continue, which I have to admit, I was not clued in a few weeks ago that you were coming out with a new album, but here it is, one called Running on Faith, and I had the pleasure to listen to it in full before our interview, and you've still got the chops. Absolutely, you do. And I was delighted to hear some of your vocal musings, not only on things that had more of a classic rock influence, but also the blues. But as I was reading in the press release for the album, this is more or less your way of looking at the current events and songs that, especially now, speak to those. Can you kind of give us the backstory on Running on Faith?
This process took 2 years to do in its completion. I did demos for it starting on the 22nd of August of 2018. Yeah, 2018. Went into this recording studio in Rancho Mirage. I'm in Cathedral City, California, which is right next door to Palm Springs, and Rancho Mirage is right next to Cat City. And so there's this studio called Music People, and this gentleman by the name of Leon Becken owns the studio, and we were looking for a studio, and it was really cool that we found this place. My manager, Nancy, and I found it. Then I didn't have to go all the way to Los Angeles or anything like that. It was really wonderful, and ideas just kind of like kept flowing, and then over a 2-year period we came up with all the material, and there it is. I mean, but what's really amazing to me is that this album represents, at least in part, some of what is going on right now. Really amazing. It really is. I mean, I'd like to think that yes, this is a horrific time for a lot of people, but I would like to think that my music can be of comfort and solace to people who are coming into the world as well as people who are going out of it.
And it's not an album filled, say, with what you would call jazz standards. The composers are certainly familiar. The first track, for instance, is from a fellow named Percy Mayfield, who, if you don't know the name, of course, you know one of his songs, at least, Hit the Road Jack, that Ray Charles did. Tell us about some of the thinking behind your song choices. These are composers that you've admired, but also songs that mean a great deal to you as well, from what I gather.
Yeah, a tune called Something So Right was introduced to me by a brilliant pianist by the name of Overton Berry, who is in the Northwest, in the Seattle area. And the title track, Running on Faith, I learned from an album called Journeyman that was done so eloquently and wonderfully by Eric Clapton in the 1990s. And that's how I came upon that. But some of the blues, like Everybody Looks Good at the Starting Line, was written by Paul Thorne. And my manager, Nancy, thought that it would be really kind of cool. And I love the tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. It's very humorous. And, very true. Every song, I like to have it be kind of a part of my own experience for things that I'd kind of lived through. Like The Sun Will Shine on You, that was done originally by Jeff Lynne of ELO, Electric Light Orchestra, and I just wanted to, in this work, I love jazz. That's my deal. But I wanted to broaden the brush a little bit, and kind of get across that blues is also a very important part of jazz, and that all music can represent each other in a very wonderful and unique way.
There's one track in particular that you and I discussed, and it's a song that I have known for many years. It's an old spiritual, but you made it into a wonderful instrumental arrangement. What is so special for you about Swing Low, Sweet Chariot?
I'd like to think that when it's time for me to make my transition, that's the word I like to use, that there'll be, there'll be beings, there'll be people on the other side to be able to greet me, like my mom and like my dad and many other people that have gone on before me. And, it's just, that's what it kind of like represents to me.
Thinking about this album and what your intent is behind it, how you feel that it does speak to our present times here. We think about how your work over the years has contributed to the musical conversation, whether it's in jazz or pop music. How do you think that this album contributes to a musical conversation as jazz and pop music continue to evolve?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I think I touched upon this a few minutes ago as far as music can be kind of like a healer. It can be like a raising of consciousness. And what my hope is, and I am getting a little bit emotional about this when I say it, but my hope is that this album will heal, that will bring a sense of healing, that will bring a sense, like I said before, of comfort to people that, that could really use it. And God knows people are going to be spending a lot more time at home than they will be running around, that's for sure. So it's just impeccable, the timing of it all.
As far as interview questions, that's all the questions I have, but I have a story I need to share with you before we go for today, if you have just a few more moments. You mentioned that album Timeless from 1986, the one that... So 20 years ago, so I would have been about 11 or 12, Mom and Dad were getting ready to divorce. It was not a good time, and I won't go into specifics. We don't need to discuss that. I don't know exactly how it happened, but Dad had received as a gift a couple of GRP priceless jazz samplers. And I don't remember the exact volumes, but there were artists like, I remember I heard Johnny Hartman. It Never Entered My Mind from Impulse back in the 60s. There was Ella Fitzgerald. There was Billie Holiday. There was Louis Armstrong. And there was even a recording from Sonny Stitt. But then I came across a recording, and we didn't grow up with jazz in my home. I heard it on like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, or I heard the old songs on the Little Rascals from back in the 30s. But this is the first time I heard jazz music. All right. So I was going through, and I didn't recognize really, outside of Louis and Ella, I didn't recognize any names. And I came across this track of a Johnny Mandel composition. And it started off with a saxophone, which, as you know now, is Stan Getz. And all of a sudden, behind Stan came this crescendo of strings. And then I heard a particular voice, and it was yours, on a recording of A Time for Love from back in 86.
Yeah, I knew that's where you were going. I knew it.
And I've got to tell you, it was that recording, more than any other I heard at that time, that said, this music is something special, and I just fell in love with it right then and there.
Oh, that is so cool, Jay. That is just so ultra cool.
Yeah. So,
wow.
So I don't get to
and
tell...
after all these years, here we are, right?
If it weren't for recordings like yours, hearing, Love Walked In or A Time for Love, I don't know that I might have found jazz as I did. And I don't know that I would be having it as a career or hosting my radio show. And yet, here we are.
Oh, my goodness. Do you know how honored I feel? This is just so cool. Oh, my gosh. Wow.
Yep. And I did go back and listen to that track again last night.
86, 96, 2006.
34 years.
34 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and here we are in the midst of this time of pause. Wow, this is really a trip. This has made my whole week to think that my music would make that heavy of an impact on you.
Oh, it did. It did. And I honestly don't know how to describe what I felt when I heard your voice, but it was like nothing. I mean, I've always been a Patsy Cline fan, and your rendition of Crazy is one of the only ones I'll play besides Patsy's. And
with the late Jack Shelton.
But I will tell you, though, especially on when you come back after the 3/4 instrumental and it goes back into a rubato, when you do that refrain and start to go up in the stratosphere, even when not even being 13, I was gripped. That's the only way I can describe it.
How lovely.
So, yeah.
Aww.
So I say all of that to just say thanks.
Oh, God, I wish you'd... I hope you're recording a little bit of this.
Oh, I am. Don't you worry. I want to share this with people later.
We need to savor this as well because, this is part of the history. This is so cool, Jay. This is God, I'm almost rendered speechless. I to think, you know what I mean? I needed this. I really needed this little boost today. I think it's going to make the rest of the summer, the rest of whatever, I know that there's a design. I know that it's going to work out, and I thank God that I feel safe and protected in my home, that I got puss, and that I do have an attitude of gratitude, that I can live in faith and not fear. But wow.
Wow, indeed. What a privilege to be able to chat with Beatles for a little while, to hear the stories about her career and her own inspirations. And I don't often get to share my own stories with those who have impacted my life. And so I'm truly grateful to have spoken with Diane. Thanks to the many involved who helped make this interview possible. For more information on Diane's new album, Running on Faith, visit the website, Diane Schuur, that's SCHUUR, DianeSchuur.com. Until we meet again, I'm Jay Daniels, thanking you for joining us in studio.